In 1999, a special audit at the Development Bank of the Philippines branch in Lucena City uncovered a massive financial discrepancy. 4.8 million pesos in cash had vanished. After a lengthy investigation, the Office of the Deputy Ombudsman for Luzon issued its findings in April 2005. They determined there was probable cause to indict several individuals connected to the missing funds. By November of that year, formal charges were filed against bank personnel, including a branch teller and a document analyst, along with the private owners of certain corporate accounts. The charges detailed a coordinated scheme of malversation of public funds, falsification, and graft. Securing a conviction for multi-layered financial crimes is incredibly demanding. The state carries the absolute burden to prove exactly how the funds were diverted, requiring a meticulous step-by-step presentation of forensic accounting, documentary evidence, and direct witness testimony. 4 years into the litigation, in December 2009, one of the accused, Layla Ang, executed a specific procedural maneuver. She served an amended request for admission, an RFA, upon the prosecution, invoking Rule 26 of the Rules of Civil Procedure. The Office of the City Prosecutor received the document on January 5, 2010, but failed to issue a formal, sworn response within the mandated 15-day window. The Regional Trial Court, Branch 56, weaponized that missed deadline. Applying Rule 26, the judge ruled that by failing to respond, the prosecution had legally admitted the facts proposed in the defendant's request. The court then escalated the penalty. The judge elevated those implied admissions into formal judicial admissions, extending their effect across all the consolidated criminal cases tied to the DBP Lucena shortage. The prosecution scrambled to correct the error. They filed motions arguing that the document was improperly served and asked for clarification on the court's strict application of civil timelines to a criminal trial. The trial judge dismissed these motions as tardy and denied requests to expunge the document. The judicial admissions were locked in. By treating silence as a legally binding admission, a missed deadline on a civil document effectively short-circuited a multi-million peso criminal fraud trial. The state was stripped of its ability to present actual evidence. To understand why the Supreme Court eventually nullified this entirely, we have to examine the actual mechanics of Rule 26. Rule 26 is a discovery tool designed specifically for civil litigation. It allows one party to serve a written request compelling the opposing party to either admit or deny specific facts under oath, usually to expedite the trial by settling undisputed issues. For this mechanism to function legally, the party answering the request must possess direct personal knowledge of the facts they are swearing to. This chart highlights a structural flaw. The prosecutor was not present when the crime occurred, having no personal connection to the event. Their understanding is entirely secondhand, mediated through forensic documents, audits, and direct witness testimony. If a court forces a prosecutor to sign a sworn statement admitting specific facts of the crime, the legal system faces a paradox. The prosecutor would be testifying to events they never personally witnessed. Under the strict rules of evidence, any factual attestation made by a prosecutor regarding the crime is legally classified as hearsay. Rule 26 requires personal knowledge. Prosecutors lack it entirely. Therefore, forcing the state to answer an RFA attempts to substitute inadmissible prosecutorial hearsay for valid witness testimony. The structural friction works in both directions. Consider if the state wielded this exact civil tool against a criminal defendant. If the prosecution served a request for admission on the accused, the defendant would be forced to supply sworn testimonial responses regarding their alleged actions, or risk having their silence treated as an admission of guilt. This directly violates Article 3, Section 17 of the Philippine Constitution, which guarantees an absolute privilege against self-incrimination. You cannot legally compel an accused individual to provide evidence against themselves. At the outset of a criminal proceeding, the state's evidentiary scale is empty, while the accused is protected by the immense weight of the presumption of innocence. The case must fall purely on actively presented evidence. Yet, by utilizing Rule 26, the trial court allowed a procedural default to shatter the presumption of innocence, bypassing an actual trial. The application of Rule 26 here did not expedite justice. It actively shifted the burden of proof, neutralized the state's obligation to present its case, and threatened the fundamental constitutional shields designed to protect the accused. Courts do have a mechanism called suppletory application, which allows them to borrow rules from civil procedure to fill specific, narrow gaps in criminal procedure. However, this borrowing is subject to a strict filter. Civil tools can only be imported in exceptional circumstances, and only if all constitutional rights, like the right to a public trial and the right to confront witnesses, are entirely preserved. While the Supreme Court has previously allowed limited civil discovery methods in criminal trials to ensure fairness, Rule 26 fails this filter entirely. Its core mechanics directly conflict with the required procedural safeguards of criminal law. Seeking to correct the trial court's misapplication of the rule, the prosecution filed a Rule 65 certiorari petition to the Sandigan Bayan, but the anti-graft court dismissed the petition on procedural grounds. The Sandigan Bayan questioned whether the deputized prosecutor, Attorney Michael Vernon DeGorio, even possessed the specific authority from the ombudsman to file such an appellate petition on behalf of the people. The Supreme Court later resolved this jurisdictional challenge, interpreting the ombudsman's deputization broadly. An authorization to act during the proceedings with the trial courts legally encompasses the power to file ancillary, interlocutory remedies, like certiorari, while the main trial is still pending. Procedural mechanics, whether evaluating the scope of a prosecutor's deputization or the filing of civil discovery documents, must be measured by a single standard. Do they serve the presentation of the substantive case, or do they arbitrarily hinder it? The Supreme Court en banc delivered a definitive ruling, reversing the Sandigan Bayan's dismissal and directly addressing the trial court's legal errors. The court determined that the regional trial court committed grave abuse of discretion. By characterizing a missed deadline as a judicial admission, the lower court effectively deprived the prosecution of its core duty to prove the elements of the crime. The legal consequence was absolute. The Supreme Court declared the joint orders of the trial court void, treating them as a total legal nullity, and directed the trial in Lucena City to proceed with reasonable dispatch. The en banc decision also surfaced a deep jurisprudential debate. Justice Kagioya issued a separate opinion, arguing that only the accused should use requests for admission to balance the massive resource advantage held by the state. But Justice Perlis Bernabé's concurring opinion established the prevailing boundary. The suppletory application of civil rules cannot alter substantive protections. Procedure cannot amend substantive rights. The ruling in People v. Ong anchors a crucial boundary in Philippine law. The mechanics of civil litigation cannot be copy-pasted into criminal courts, because courtroom efficiency can never be allowed to override the fundamental architecture of criminal justice. Substantive truth must always dictate the procedure, not the other way around.